These are the absolute worst picks in fantasy football. If you're taking these players, stop right now. Go trade them off of your roster. These are players that your imbecile league mates should be taking. We got Corey here from Fantasy Stock Exchange. Corey, I'm curious who your guy is.
Yeah, and your absolute buffoon league mates are drafting the crap out of Davante Adams. And Davante Adams, I get it, has been a staple of fantasy football. He's won me championships. He's probably won a lot of you guys championships in the past. But Davante Adams, the projection for fantasy is different than Davante Adams, the real-life NFL wide receiver. For me, the way that I draft fantasy football teams, particularly in the first, second, and third round, is I evaluate the players based on their underlying risk factors. Davante Adams has a lot of them. For starters, I think his starting quarterback situation is 32nd in the NFL. I think it's the worst quarterback core in the league, to the point that Antonio Pierce didn't even know who to start because both guys were so absolutely atrocious. So there's that. Davante Adams himself, again, he's going to be the number one there, but he has a little bit of target competition. Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, proven target earners, and Michael Mayer if they're going to run a lot of two tight end sets. Then you also have the fact that Davante Adams himself, the player, did show a slight regression last year. Now, you could argue it was because he was playing through injury. You could argue the quarterback play. But if you're arguing the quarterback play and playing through injury, is that stuff going to improve for a player who is now in year 10 of his NFL career, year 11 of his NFL career? Historically, wide receivers start to taper off around year 9, year 10. So you have all of these risk factors on Davante Adams, and I would forgive all of this if he just had a capable offense, a really good quarterback throwing him the football, but he doesn't have that stuff. So he's going to have to be the type of player that he was in his Green Bay days, in his prime days, to elevate the play of his quarterbacks, to elevate his fantasy point production. So I look at Davante Adams and I think you draft this guy in the mid-second round as your wide receiver 1 for your roster, hoping that you're going to get a top 12 receiver. He very well could. Maybe he's wide receiver 12 in points per game. Maybe he's wide receiver 17 in points per game. I don't see a huge return on investment that I like to have when I'm taking a first or a second round player. And also too, it's not like he's risk free. He has a very high chance of busting as well. So if you're going to take a big risk on a player, they at least need to have like a really high ceiling is the way that I look at it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think the one thing that Davante Adams has going for him over some of the guys in that range at least is A, he's the wide receiver 1 on his own team, although it's a bad team. B, the targets there. He's getting a ton of targets. The target volume is going to be soaked up by Davante Adams almost exclusively. Obviously, you got Bowers there. You've got Jacoby Myers, who I like Jacoby Myers at price a little bit more because you're getting him like 10th, 11th round. And I think that he's a guy that's outperformed his ADP 2 years in a row now. And I honestly think he could end up getting a fair amount of targets there as well. But I think the one thing that people kind of gravitate towards when they're taking Davante Adams is the high target volume there. Yeah. However, with Davante Adams, you saw him get those targets last year, and he was a clear outlier based on the number of targets he got and then what he actually did with those targets from a fantasy production standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're at a point in your fantasy draft where you're drafting a player who's on a bad team, like for starters, just as an overall heuristic for me in fantasy football, I like my first 3 to 4 players to come from teams that I really believe in. And if I do take a guy like Davante Adams, I really want to make sure my first couple of picks are really from great offenses: Chiefs, Dolphins, Eagles, Cowboys, those type of offenses that you really believe in. And I think it kind of just sets you behind the 8 ball to take a deviation into a team, a player from a bad offense. And again, when you're an older player going into year 11 of your career, do you have it in the tank to be a 2.75 plus yards per route run guy with a bad quarterback play? Not to mention too, I think Antonio Pierce is going to want to establish the run with this team. They don't really have great running backs, but I do think philosophically Zamir White and Alexander Mattison probably have a lot of touches that they're about to get, split backfield, but it's not the type of offense I think they're going to be like, yeah, here you go, Gardner, drop back 675 times this year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you're looking at some of the red flags and the players that busted in previous years, you know, most of the time the red flags are either A, they were really old and they hit their age cliff, or B, they were on an absolutely awful offense. And with Davante Adams, it's both of those things, right? I mean, it's a double whammy in terms of like 2 of the biggest red flags for first 2 round picks. Like you're hitting both of them with Davante Adams. So practically in the second round, and this is one of the reasons that why on our channel, in our Flock League creator draft the other day, I draft wide receiver in the first round. I love taking wide receiver in the first round and then try to take running back in the second. I like balancing those two positions in the first 2 rounds. And so with that, instead of taking Davante Adams in the second, who would you pivot towards?
Yeah, so I mean, we might disagree on some of these, but I would definitely be okay going for those kind of like tier 2 running backs, which would be for me like Achane, obviously Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor. Yep. And if you're further down the board, more so at the 2-3 turn, Isaiah Pacheco, Travis Etienne, Kyron Williams, whichever guy that you prefer in that area. I think if you're going running back, that's a good option to do it. If you're going to take a wide receiver who's a clear alpha in a bad offense, to me, Chris Olave is a better pick. I'm not huge on Chris Olave, but it's the same thesis as Davante Adams, where you're getting an alpha wide receiver with slightly better quarterback play, and he's younger and he's still an ascending player. I actually prefer going after guys who I can almost bet more on efficiency and great offensive production, like Nico Collins, like Brandon Ayuk, like Deebo Samuel, like Jalen Waddle, as opposed to a guy like Devontae Adams or Cooper Kupp potentially as well. So with all of those guys, I just feel more solidified and secured with their early round projections. I'm not the type of person who typically likes to take a lot of risk early on in drafts. If I do it, it'll be like one of my picks. And from what I've seen in the second round, it's Devontae Adams is both the lowest ceiling and the highest risk option, is just the way that I look at the ADP. And I've gone back to like top 36 wide receiver ADPs the last 4 or 5 years. And like veteran wide receivers, guys who are over 29 years old, they bust a third of the time. And when you compare that to wide receivers who have been productive already, who are under 28, 29 years old, and then also wide receivers who haven't, produced as a wide receiver one yet, but are kind of like breakout candidate guys, those numbers are around like 13, 15% of the time. So you're getting a significant discount on injury risk and bust risk when it comes to young wide receivers versus older wide receivers, especially when, as we talked about already, the micro player take factor is that bad offense, low pass volume, potentially a declining player. Nothing really adds up to me and checks boxes for Devontae Adams.
All right, let's pivot to my guy here. My guy's going to be Keenan Allen, actually. And Keenan Allen, I think with most of the allegations this offseason are he's slow and fat, right? And so, you could stop there, but let's actually give you some analysis here. Keenan Allen, coming off of a year where actually Keenan Allen last year was actually pretty good. And part of that was just a product of the situation that he was in, right? There really wasn't anybody there. Mike Williams, of course, got hurt. Justin Herbert really didn't have anybody else to throw the ball to. So you saw Keenan Allen, even though, he's getting up there in age, be able to perform at a wide receiver one level again last year. One of the better fantasy receivers of the last decade. Like he really was a really good fantasy asset. Now, going to the Chicago Bears, when you're looking from a team investment standpoint at what the Chicago Bears gave up for him, I think it's clear that, what they gave up for him versus the pick that they spent on Rome Odunze tells you what you need to know about how they value those two players. Now, would it super surprise me if Rome Odunze didn't outproduce Keenan Allen this year? No, I don't think it would. But with that being said, DJ Moore, coming off his best season in his career, playing with the best quarterback in his career by far, in my opinion. I think this is not even close. It's the best situation of his career. Yep. He's set to build on that, maybe get a little bit more consistent production, but he also just got absolutely paid. You're talking about in the same offseason, you get team investment benchmarks for each of these three guys. And easily, Keenan Allen is the guy they are least invested in. I think you're going to see that. I think DJ Moore is their guy. I think they're going to roll with him. But I think they really value Rome Odunze. And so my thing with the Chicago Bears offense, and I think it's going to be a notably better Chicago Bears offense this year, is I think that if anybody is going to get that production besides DJ Moore, and like full transparency, I actually like DJ Moore in fantasy football quite a bit this year. I think he can get a lot of those targets. I think that second guy actually could be Rome Odunze. You've already seen, the training camp hype and the fact that him and Caleb Williams have chemistry together. But one thing that, you talk about is the potential chemistry with rookie quarterbacks and wide receivers that come into the league together, right? And so I think Rome and Caleb are going to have great chemistry. And I think if anybody from that receiver room is going to produce this year, besides DJ Moore, my bet is actually on Rome Odunze. And Rome Odunze is actually cheaper than Keenan Allen in fantasy drafts right now.
Yeah, and I think you did a good job covering the talent profiles of the players, because obviously Keenan Allen was like a top 5 fantasy receiver when he was on the field last year. Correct. But we've kind of detailed how kind of Mickey Mouse that production was, where you have no other guys. It was the nutted scenario for him. Mike Williams goes down, Quentin Johnston's an absolute zero. You also have Austin Eckler kind of being completely washed. Justin Herbert just relied on the guy that he could rely on. It's not like Keenan Allen is useless. He absolutely can still generate first downs, and that's what he did last year. But again, going back to what I said about Devontae Adams, you have an elevated injury risk when guys are entering year 13 or year 12 of his career with Keenan Allen. You also have now schematic disadvantages for Keenan Allen, where Shane Waldron ran 3 wide receiver sets at like a 63% clip when having Metcalf, JSN, and Tyler Lockett in Seattle last year.
Correct.
That's a below average rate in the NFL. If one of these guys is coming off the field, is it the slow slot wide receiver who doesn't necessarily have the speed anymore and never really did have the speed, but definitely not at this advanced age, to work on the outside? Or is Rome Odunze and DJ Moore going to be the primary outside wide receivers? We've also seen them in the preseason working a lot of Gerald Everett, working a lot of Cole Kmet in 2 tight end sets. So I worry that Keenan Allen will be on the field the least often, has probably the least upside, on a per target, what he can do with each target basis, because I think Odunze is a great downfield threat. DJ Moore, we know what he can do after the catch. Right. You need volume for Keenan Allen, and I don't think it'll be there for a number of reasons. One, he's not good enough at this point in his career, in my opinion. 2, he might not be on the field as much as these other guys, like I said. And then also too, the chemistry factor, like you talked about with DJ Moore, with Odunze. And then again, the vibes, the smell test is all completely soured right now with the he's slow, he's fat stuff. It's like, it's not the only reason I'm out on Keenan Allen. It's just kind of the cherry on top.
No, it is. I think it's kind of solidifying our opinions on Keenan Allen. And again, like a lot of people are going to point to Shane Waldron, like you mentioned, and say, okay, look at what happened to JSN last year. This is why I'm concerned with Rome Odunze. And to that, I would say these are two very different players, right? I mean, these are two very different players with very different skill sets, right? And Rome Odunze, I mean, and when you're looking at the draft capital alone, is considered a better prospect than JSN was, and I would even agree with that. I think Rome Odunze was. I think Rome Odunze in almost any other class would have been the wide receiver 1. And so with that being said, I think the Chicago Bears knew exactly what they were doing when they were taking him in the first round. And I don't think you have a team take a weapon like that unless you plan to deploy him right away. I mean, when is the last time you saw a receiver go top 15 in the draft and they didn't immediately give him as much work as he possibly could handle, because that is the guy that they're trying to build their future around. I think just from that standpoint alone, I don't think that Shane Waldron will take Rome Odunze off the field. Maybe at the beginning of the season, you see Rome Odunze is that guy off the field. However, I don't think that will last. I mean, I think if anything, it's already kind of trending towards Rome Odunze being into wide receiver sets there. And so I think the opportunity is going to be good for Rome. And again, it's volume with Keenan. It was the targets with Keenan, and everybody knew that. And so if Keenan doesn't get the targets, I just don't think he's going to be productive this year.
Yeah, like the other thing too that's different about the JSN situation is if anybody was going to come off the field, it was going to be Smith and Jigba because he was a slot projection coming into the NFL. Also, too, like we talked about already, Lockett and Metcalf had worked with Geno for years prior to that. They had already established chemistry. Caleb is a brand new quarterback, and if anybody is going to have the best chemistry with him, it's going to be the other rookie who comes in rookie mini camps. They actually worked out before the draft together. They were both, I guess, told probably by the Bears that, hey, we'd love to pair you guys together, start working out together, working on your chemistry. So for me, I look at Keenan Allen as, like he's got to prove himself to the new quarterback or show up the chemistry with the new quarterback just as much as these other guys, only he potentially is the odd man out in 3 wide receiver sets as we kind of detailed already.
Absolutely. All right. I appreciate you, Corey.
Sweet.
All right. We got Danny here from FSE. Danny, tell us who imbeciles are drafting.
The imbeciles are drafting Terry McLaurin, wide receiver of the Washington Commanders. And as we're recording it, recent news, obviously Jahan Dotson actually gets traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm even more concerned that people will be pushing him up further up the boards. And the reason why I am off of Terry McLaurin is that I don't think many people realize, because he's a 2019 drafted player, people assume that he's the same age as DK Metcalf, same age as AJ Brown. Terry McLaurin is going to be 29 years old without a single top 15 wide receiver season under his belt. I don't think many people realize just how fantasy friendly the offense was with Sam Howell last year. It's almost like the 2019 Jameis Winston effect, in the sense that is he a great real life quarterback? Not necessarily, but Washington was actually tied for the league lead in terms of passing attempts per game at 37.4, and Sam Howell was willing to throw the ball down the field. Sam Howell was willing to take chances, and as much as I love Jaden Daniels, I think he's going to be more of an efficient passer, and we've actually seen with the Cliff Kingsbury offense in this preseason that Jaden Daniels so far has had a 5.5 ADOT. So Terry McLaurin, again, the value he would be able to get would be working down the field, but the problem is the way this offense is structured right now is they aren't necessarily taking those type of deep shots with Jaden Daniels, with Terry McLaurin. Not to mention, I mean, it's almost the same usage we've seen, with DeAndre Hopkins in the past when Cliff Kingsbury was his offensive coordinator, but there's no real diversity with this offense. There's no real versatility. Every single snap, for the most part, Terry McLaurin has played has been on the left boundary. We've seen the most innovative offensive coordinators. We're talking about our offensive play callers. We're talking about Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan. What they do so well is getting their best receivers in different spots, working them in the slot, working them either side of the field, getting them in motion. We haven't seen that with this Cliff Kingsbury offense, and quite frankly, Terry McLaurin's been a wide receiver 2-3 for his whole career. Terry McLaurin is just a pick that doesn't have the upside to win your league. Again, it's more so filling a wide receiver quota rather than trying to hit on a player that can quite frankly be that league-winning archetype.
Yeah, and I think you're starting to see this Luke McCaffrey third-round picks sort of come to fruition and why they did it. I don't know if they were planning on trading Jahan Dotson to begin with when they went with the wide receiver day 2, and they went with Ben Sinnott in the second round as well. But to me, I'm very curious to see how this volume is redistributed with Jahan Dotson now out of the offense. I mean, some people, like you said, are going to think that it's just going to be all Terry McLaurin now and that he's going to get all the volume that Dotson wasn't. But who do you think is going to kind of be elevated because of this move now that we didn't initially expect? I would assume it's one of the rookies, right?
I mean, assuming, of course, Terry McLaurin will still be the one on this team, but the problem that I have is Is he the one that's going to take over the league? Is he the one that's going to have the unlimited upside like a Malik Neighbors would? Which in home leagues, I can see people taking the name value of a Terry McLaurin over a Malik Neighbors. And I get it. It's kind of a, it's kind of an ambiguous target hierarchy at this point, but I loved Benson at the prospect. I think he can be at play in the second half of the season. Luke McCaffrey, by all accounts, looks like he's allocating well. And to be honest, I think it's more so just losing Jahan Dotson. We're looking at this offense on paper, man. This could be a bottom 5 unit in the NFL.
It very well could be. It's not looking pretty, and some of it is going to be the play calling at the end of the day. As much as we like Cliff Kingsbury and what he can offer downfield, because they just like to push the ball downfield or kind of an air raid offense, it isn't like a super hyper efficient. It doesn't have to be a hyper efficient or a hyper passing volume offense for it to still be effective. So it's kind of weird, that whole move that they made. And I'm with you on Terry. Like we're in year 6 now with Terry still talking about him having low end wide receiver 1 upside, and it's just ridiculous. It's not there. It's ridiculous. So the last pick here, I'm just going for it at this point because it's the freaking end of the video, and you guys are absolutely insane for drafting Jameson Williams where you're taking him. What the heck are we doing taking the 5th option in that offense? The 5th. Don't deny it. He's the 5th. From an opportunity and a touch perspective, he is the 5th option in the Lions offense. And I get it's really, really sexy because Ben Johnson is the offensive coordinator, and he stayed, and he decided to turn down the head coaching job in Washington. And it's going to be super hyper efficient. It's going to be a high point scoring offense. And we're going to have Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. I just mentioned 4 guys. Dude, the Dolphins can't even do this, and they're like the most productive offense in the NFL. Seriously. Like, what do we expect Jameson Williams to do? Is he going to overtake Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's the best slot wide receiver in the NFL? Is he going to overtake a record-setting rookie tight end in Sam Laporta, who's now going into his 2nd year and is probably going to kick some butt? Are we going to bet on Jameson Williams taking a majority of targets in that offense with those receiving threats in front of him? No. Best ball, I can maybe kind of sort of understand why you would possibly consider taking Jameson Williams, but in regular redraft formats in your home leagues where guys are taking shots on Jameson Williams left and right because he's a dog and he's finally going to go off and he threw up in practice and he's not betting anymore and Dan Campbell has spoke positively of him, it doesn't change what he does in that offense. And that is, he is a field stretcher who will have big playability once every game. Once. Yeah. If he can haul in the target. Like, seriously, this is a guy whose ADOT is going to be unbelievable, and the efficiency that he's going to have with all of his it's going to be incredibly low. Tell me what you think, because it's driving me nuts.
I mean, are we just looking at Alabama Gabe Davis all over again? Like, what's
seriously
going on here? Like, I understand,
but no production.
Exactly. Like, from a real life perspective, the value that Jameson Williams adds to his offense, I get it. You're stretching the field. You're working that 3rd level, but
great for the NFL.
For fantasy football, what's that going to open up? More underneath targets. Sam Laporta, like you said. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the best receivers overall in the entire NFL. We expect Jahmyr Gibbs to get back to that level of receiving prospect. Again, he wasn't really an efficient receiver in his rookie season, but he was such a damn efficient runner. I do think Jahmyr Gibbs is closer to that receiving profile he saw in college, one of the best receiving running backs we have seen in a recent modern era, up there with Christian McCaffrey, up there with Breece Hall. Not to mention, like you said, when David Montgomery's on the field, we're going to see him be able to get the touches. It's at the point where, with Jameson Williams, are you looking for a hyper-efficient 3 to 4 target per game player? No. We're playing in PPR. We're playing half PPR. Give me the guys that can get 7, 8, 9, 10 targets a game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a waste of a pick, in my opinion. In the top 8 to 10 rounds of your fantasy draft, you're looking for difference makers and guys that you can plug into your flex at any point in time, given bye weeks, given injuries, given unexpected situations that arise all the time, inevitably in fantasy football. It's a waste of a pick. I mean, there are guys left in that range that are either lead assets in less than ideal offenses or second options in really, really good offenses at the wide receiver position and at the running back position as well. It just makes absolutely no sense to me. Stop doing it. Please stop doing it.
When you're thinking about taking Jameson Williams, just go and click the draft button on Jalen Polk instead.
Bingo. You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. We appreciate you guys watching today. Make sure you like and subscribe to the video and go check out Fantasy Stock Exchange's channel as well. They've got a bunch of great content coming out. We will be coming out with more videos like this. We did collabs with a bunch of different channels, including Flock Fantasy and Fantasyland as well. So appreciate you watching, and we will see you later.